So now we're moving on to the next thing, which is when we start looking at two variables together. And this is where we start looking for some kind of evidence of association or correlation. And we'll start off here with an example about, this is just one I pulled from the Tokyo Olympics. So you quite often hear people talking, I've heard people talking about, whether certain continents are better than others at winning medals at the Olympics and so on. So I thought I'll have a look at that from the Tokyo Olympics. So what I did here is I just pulled the countries which won more than 20 or more medals in the recent Tokyo Olympics. I haven't distinguished between gold, silver and bronze, and the reason for that is, as we saw last week, I think it was, sometimes there's such a tiny difference between the ability that leads to a gold, silver or bronze medal that you can hardly distinguish. Okay, so it's total medal counts. What I've then done is I have aggregated the data by continent. Now I know there's several different schemes for putting things into continents. I've used what's known as the 7-continent system here, although there's only 5 of them represented. And so Australia includes New Zealand and the Pacific Islands, for example. And those are the total medal counts. So the question here would be, does it look like there's a relationship between continents and medal scores? Are some continents better than others? And so what I've done firstly is I've created a dot chart. So this is a different kind of dot chart because you've got more than one data point along a line, but it's still a dot chart. So this is showing us, so each dot there is a country. And when you look at that, just eyeballing it, you think, oh yeah, it sort of looks like there's a hierarchy there. But maybe there's not, because when you look at North America, you basically got two countries. You've got Brazil and Canada rather. You've got Canada and the United States. There's only 2 countries there, and they're opposite extremes. If you look at Asia, you've got 4 countries there with China up here, and I forget the order of the others, but that's a bit more spread out, and 3 of them are up around the middle, and then Europe's a different kind of distribution. It's a bit hard to tell. And there's the same data as box plots. And again, it's a little bit hard to tell. The truth with this one is, I think you would look at that and you think, there's probably not too much we can conclude from this one. Probably draw a conclusion about South America and Australia. It's a little. I think the issue really here is this is just not a very big data set. There's not a huge sample there. Possibly if I'd done this with all of the countries that participated in the Olympics, it might have been a slightly clearer picture. But that's the kind of thing that you look at. Now, I want to introduce some terminology. So I've used the word association, and I want to introduce a few other terms. So the question we're asking here is, if we know the continent from which a country belongs, or to which a country belongs, how much information does that give us about predicting their Olympic medal count? And I think the conclusion I would draw is, if we just know the continent, it probably doesn't give us much useful information. So if we know it's North America, that I forget exactly everything that counts in North America, but it's mainly the United States and Canada. Well, it's a 50% chance it's Canada and a 50% chance it's North America, but the outcome, the number of medals is going to be hugely different depending on which one of those it is. If we know the country is from Asia, that might give us a better idea. Maybe the information's a bit better there. But I want you to start thinking, and this is something I'll reinforce during the course, I want you to start thinking about association and correlation in terms of information. How much information you're getting that will enable you to predict. Now I'm going to use the terminology independent variable and dependent variable. Sorry, there is a typo there. That should be dependent. Sorry about that. Okay. Now, let me say a bit about how I'm going to use the word correlation. So most courses you do where that term comes up, the person who uses the word correlation probably means something called the Pearson correlation coefficient. And I will introduce that a little later. But here's what I'm going to do in this course is I will use the term correlation very generally in situations where we have some evidence or data which improves our ability to predict something or is evidence of a causal relationship. That's a very general way of using it. If I'm going to be talking about the Pearson correlation coefficient, then I will say Pearson correlation coefficient. Okay. Here's another case. So this is from a data set we're going to look at in a moment, which was 2 years of data from Washington of bicycle rentals. And what these three box plots show you is the number of bike rentals per day depending on the weather conditions. So the dependent variable is the rentals, the number of bike rentals per day, and the independent variable, the predictor variable, is the weather conditions. There were three. This is a categorical variable. It had three categories, so some combination of rain, snow or storm, or misty, or what they describe as good weather, which means none of those two. One thing I learned from this is that Washington seems to be misty a lot of the time. Anyway, now when you look at that, you can see a pretty clear pattern, can't you? The rentals seem to go up as the weather improves. And something you might want to think about is whether that categorical variable is ordered. Probably is. We think of, good, bad and terrible weather. It probably is ordered in that sense. But I would look at that and say, yeah, that looks like there's a correlation there. And there are techniques we can use to check for that. But that's just as a visualization in that case, as an exploratory visualization of the data. I'd look at that and I'd say, okay, that's something I'd like to investigate. And the context in which I'd be investigating it, this is a bike rental business. I'm not sure if it's government run or privately run, but in that kind of a business, you've got a whole lot of resources that go into maintaining a stock of bicycles, moving them from place to place, making sure they're, repaired and all of this kind of thing. And when you're doing that, you want to be able to estimate the demand on any given day of the week or any day that's coming up. And so if the weather forecast is correlated with the demand for rental bikes, then that might help you with that decision making. That's the context.